Thank you for joining us for the D. Miller Justice Series, AAPI in New Jersey. As Rachel said, I'm Akil Roper. I'm a Senior Vice President here at Legal Service of New Jersey, and I am very happy to start today's program. I think we're all in for a treat. But just to give you a little bit about our series, the D. Miller Justice Series is named in honor of LSNJ's co-founder and former president, D. Miller, and is a free webinar series open to the public intended to raise awareness of important social, legal, and economic justice issues. These free events feature guest speakers and members of the community on topics of appeal to both lawyers and non-lawyers. CLE credits are provided and past webinar events are archived and available for viewing on our website, lsnj.org. Today's panel will explore discrimination against Asian American and Pacific Islander community in a wide lens, highlighting various forms of discrimination and the responses from different sectors, education, government agencies, the legal community, and beyond. And we'll also talk about representation and why that's important. We're lucky to have with us experts leading this conversation who will not only share their wealth of knowledge, but provide their important and unique perspectives. The hope, in part, is to give a window into the many facets of bias and AAPI discrimination and inform how we as a community, a state, and a society respond. Well-timed, it is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and we respectfully acknowledge the contributions and influence of this important segment of the community on our history and our culture, and commit to lift up and amplify their voices. But all this in the face of unpredictable media cycles and what appears to be a decreased appetite for race and equity in the public arena. So we must remain present and intentional. So introducing our esteemed and accomplished panelists. Dean Rose Cuison-Villazor is Interim Dean, Professor of Law, and Chancellor Social Justice Scholar at Rutgers University School of Law. Between 2019 and 2021, she served as Vice Dean, and she is also the Director of the Center for Immigration Law, Policy, and Social Justice. Dean Cuison-Villazor teaches and writes in the areas of immigration and citizenship law, property law, critical race theory, Asian Americans and the law, and equal protection law. Dean Cuison-Villazor's scholarship has appeared in the top law journals in the country, including the California Law Review, Columbia Law Review, Harvard Law Review Forum, Washington University Law Review, and others. Her books include Immigration and Refugee Law and Policy, Property and Identity, Race and Races, Cases and Resources for a Diverse America. She obtained her LLM from Columbia Law School and her JD from American University. Next, Fannie Chan Jarvis uses the pronouns she and her, and is a community relations specialist for the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights. Fannie recently joined NJDCR's community relations team and served as the primary liaison to the AAPI communities. She received both her Bachelor of Arts and Master of Public Administration from New York University. Originally from NYC's Chinatown, she proudly identifies as a descendant of immigrants, laborers, American veterans, and community advocates. Carrying on the family tradition of activism and public service, Fannie has a professional background in education and government, where she worked on public policy, community relations, and project management. She has been deeply invested in local advocacy and community building efforts. Dr. Ying Lu is an associate professor at NYU Steinhardt School of Culture, Education, and Human Development. She oversees the Education Studies program that focuses on education for social change. Her current research areas include equity and opportunities in public education. She is also a dedicated community advocate. She is a co-founder of the E Pluribus Unum Project, an organization that aims to bring about transformative education by promoting pluralistic curriculum. Dr. Lu also serves on the board of Make Us Visible NJ, a grassroots organization that has effectively advocated for the passing of a state law mandating the inclusion of Asian American and Pacific Islanders curriculum in New Jersey's public K-12 schools. Maria P. Vallejo is a litigation and land use attorney with extensive experience representing individual, corporate, and public entity clients in state and federal court. Maria also represents private and corporate clients in all phases of land use, zoning, and permitting matters, while serving as counsel to the South Bound Brook Planning and Zoning Board. She's also an adjunct professor of law at Rutgers Law School, teaching land use, law, and practice, and president of the Hudson County Bar Association, and sits as the first Filipina American president of that organization. On the New Jersey State Bar Association, she sits on the nominating committee and is co-chair of the Business and Commercial Litigation section. She also co-chaired the NGSBA's Diversity Committee for 3 years. She is also a former director of the Asian Pacific American Lawyers Association of New Jersey. And of course, our distinguished moderator, who I've also had the pleasure of working with, Jhanice V. Domingo, a partner at Pashman, Stein, Walder, and Hayden, PC, in the firm's family law, alternative dispute resolution, and litigation practice groups, and a member, proudly, of LSNJ's Board of Trustees. She is also past president of the Asian Pacific American Lawyers Association of New Jersey, and past president and first woman president of the National Filipino American Lawyers Association. She serves as the co-chair of the Family Law Committee of the Bergen County Bar Association and previously served as co-chair of the Diversity Committee of the Bergen County Bar Association. She is a member of the New Jersey State Bar Association Family Law Executive Committee, as well as the New Jersey Supreme Court Family Practice Committee, Non-Dissolution Subcommittee, and Domestic Violence Working Group. She is currently the chair of APA LA New Jersey Judicial and Prosecutorial Appointments Committee and works closely with New Jersey's elected officials to identify highly qualified minority candidates for nomination and appointment to the New Jersey State Judiciary. We'd also like to thank Verizon for their generous sponsorship of today's Justice Series webinar. Through Verizon's financial support and their ongoing pro bono partnership, they deliver direct and impactful assistance to our clients, providing support so we can be the advocates our clients need. And with today's sponsorship, help educate all of us on dealing with the injustices and inequities that exist today. We truly appreciate all they do. So without further ado, I'll hand it right over to Jhanice Domingo to start our conversation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Akil, for that very kind introduction and for all your hard work in putting this program together. Good afternoon to everyone. It is my pleasure to moderate Legal Services of New Jersey's Justice Series. Thank you to the, I am told, over 1,000 folks who have registered for this program. Welcome. We are happy that you're able to join us today. Today, we will discuss the rise in anti-Asian discrimination and ways that we can address this longstanding problem. Anti-Asian discrimination, prejudice, bias, and mistreatment experienced by individuals of Asian descent manifests itself in various forms, including systemic barriers, stereotypes, racism, xenophobia, microaggressions, hate crimes, and unequal treatment in different aspects of life. Historically, Asians have faced discrimination in many parts of the world, from the Chinese Exclusion Act in the United States to the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. Anti-Asian sentiment has had profound impacts on communities. In recent years, incidents of anti-Asian discrimination have been on the rise, reflecting deep-seated biases and prejudices that persist in our society. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated this issue with an alarming surge in acts of racism and xenophobia directed towards individuals of Asian Pacific American descent. In the wake of the pandemic, Asian Pacific Americans worldwide have reported a disturbing increase in verbal and physical assaults, harassment, and discrimination. Recent high-profile events have brought this issue to the forefront of public consciousness. By way of example, we remember the Atlanta spa shootings. In March 2021, a gunman targeted massage parlors in the Atlanta area, killing 8 people, including 6 women of Asian descent. This tragic event highlighted the intersection of misogyny, racism, and anti-Asian bias. The Oakland Chinatown assault. In February 2021, a 91-year-old man was violently shoved to the ground in Oakland's Chinatown, resulting in his death. This incident sparked outrage and raised concerns about the vulnerability of elderly Asian individuals. The San Francisco attack. In March 2020, a 75-year-old Asian man was assaulted in one of San Francisco's neighborhoods. The attack was unprovoked and caught on surveillance footage, drawing attention to the rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans. And perhaps closest to home, the New York City subway attack. In March 2021, a 61-year-old Filipino-American man was slashed across the face with a box cutter on subway in Manhattan. This incident highlighted the dangers faced by Asians in public spaces and the need for increased security measures. Now, these recent incidents are just a glimpse into the broader issue of anti-Asian discrimination. These incidents are not isolated events, but rather a manifestation of historical and cultural factors, because throughout history, Asians have endured stereotypes and discrimination. So today, what we aim to do is to shed light on the pervasive discrimination faced by Asian Pacific American communities and explore ways to address the longstanding problem. We aim to deepen our understanding of the root causes, explore the impacts on individuals and communities, examine legal and policy perspectives, and discuss strategies for mobilizing change. But before I get to our first panelist, I am told that I have to take care of some administrative things because I'm already seeing the webinar chat with very many questions about how the attorneys in the audience can get CLE credit. So Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. The first of the 2 CLE code words for New Jersey CLE credit is the word tree, T-R-E-E. The tree in my backyard is very large. Tree. Thank you.
I love that. It's like a spelling bee competition. Use it in a sentence and everything. So let's get to our panelists. We have an esteemed panel joining me today, and I thank them for being here. Before we can discuss ways to combat anti-Asian discrimination, it is important that we first gain an understanding of what it is. So Dean Cuison-Villazor, let's start with you. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. Can you go through a bit of the history, particularly as it pertains to folks from the AAPI diaspora, and provide historical perspective of struggles and challenges of Asian American Pacific Islanders?
Yes, thank you so much, Janice. And before I start, I want to thank Akil and Janice and everybody else for organizing this panel. I'm honored to have been invited, and hopefully my participation will be helpful in helping us to better understand not only AAPI legal history, but also where we are today. To answer the question that Janice asked, I mean, there are a lot of key points in U.S. history that deeply affected Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. For now, I'm going to focus on 3 key points because I think that these 3 helped us to better understand where we are today. So those 3, I'll highlight the 3 first, and then I'll briefly talk about each one of them. First is immigration laws and exclusion, right? Second, ineligibility for citizenship. And then third, alien land laws. And so let me walk you a little bit through each of these. When I talk about immigration exclusion, I am talking about the ways in which federal immigration law barred people from Asia from coming to the United States. It began in 1875 through the law that's called the Page Act, when Congress denied the ability of Chinese women from coming to the United States because they were viewed as engaging in immoral purposes. 1875 laid the foundation to the Chinese Exclusion Act that Janice mentioned, which barred Asian or Chinese laborers from entering the United States. So there were some exceptions in the 1882 law for Chinese merchants, right? But the 1882 law was then broadened to basically bar all Asians coming from what's called the Asian Triangle. So by 1924, people from Asia were all prohibited from entering the United States as immigrants. And so what did that do? This exclusion on the base because of race, it was no doubt it was a racial exclusion. But this created was not only the ability of families to be together, because there were some immigrants who were able to come in earlier, but then because of these Asian bars or these immigration bars, then couples could not be together. It prevented the formation of families. It prevented the generation of wealth that could have been acquired because families would be together and support each other. Importantly, for some of the issues we're going to be discussing today, these immigration restrictions on the basis of race also led to the stereotype of Asians as the perpetual foreigners, right? The view that if you're Asian or Asian American, that you're deemed as foreign, because really these laws made it solidified in law that if you are coming from Asia, then you're not allowed here, that you're quote an alien and you need to stay away. And so all of these laws that restricted Asians were based on the view of protecting the United States national security, the fear of Asian invasion. Okay, so we'll return to that later on. Some of the other panelists will be highlighting some of those issues. The second set of laws within history are these laws that prevented Asian immigrants who did make it through the border, who were able to immigrate to the United States. They were not eligible to become US citizens. In particular, they were deemed racially ineligible to become US citizens. That began stemming from the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, but really got solidified in 1922 through US Supreme Court cases that said that people who are those who are eligible for citizenship are either those who are white or of African descent. So if you're a Japanese American, or at the time, or a South Asian man who tried to naturalize, Supreme Court cases said they were not racially eligible to do so. So again, that led to the perpetuation of Asians as foreigners, right? They're on this land, but they could never be part of the American polity. And then the alien land laws. So these are laws that prevented primarily Japanese Americans, Japanese nationals, and then it got extended to other groups of their ability to own land. These laws began in California, but then ultimately laws were adopted in Washington State, in Nevada, in Florida. And so these alien land laws also made it difficult for families to generate wealth, to make a living, because they face barriers to owning land for farm or to build a home. There's so many more in our U.S. history that help us to better understand contemporary discrimination. But those three, immigration laws, citizenship laws, and the alien land laws, in my mind, are critical today in understanding where we are today.
And how does critical race theory come into the picture with respect to AAPI, Dean?
Thank you. So that's a great question. Critical race theory has been in the news a lot. It's banned. The teaching of CRT is banned in a number of places, and there are penalties even for DEI workshops. Like in some states, we would not be able to do this kind of presentation, right? Because it deals with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So let me explain first what critical race theory is, and then connect that with AAPI history. Critical race theory is essentially a legal theory that examines the law's role in subordinating and discriminating against people of color. So what it is that it's a theoretical lens that helps us to understand laws and to help us see that some laws are not neutral. And in fact, there are many laws that purported to be neutral, but in fact were done in order to discriminate against people of color and had the effect of promoting white supremacy. So let me bring us back then to immigration laws, right? Immigration laws, the fact that there were laws that prevented people from China in 1875 and then in 1882 tells us that law was instrumental in creating legal and social classifications of Chinese Americans and then of Asian Americans. Critical race theory allows us to see that. It reminds us of the need to understand history and how law was instrumental in subordinating people of color. Thinking back again about ineligibility for citizenship, those citizenship laws never actually said that if you're Chinese, you're not eligible to become a citizen. It just said that this neutral terms ineligible for citizenship without defining precisely who was eligible. And so through CRT, we can look at a law that purports to be neutral and actually understand what they're designed to do, and that is to subordinate against particular people of color.
So you've talked about some of the laws that have not been favorable to Asian Americans in our country. Can you talk a little bit about some of the laws in New Jersey that do protect the rights of people with respect to their race and their ethnicity?
Yes, of course. And thankfully, we do have laws, and I believe that Fannie Chan Jarvis will be speaking much more broadly about some of those laws. And so in New Jersey, we have, of course, federal laws that apply here that prohibit discrimination on the basis of race, national origin, and other categories. And then we have the New Jersey law against discrimination, which is one of the broadest in the country, that provides protection against discrimination on the basis of race, religion, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, and many more categories. And what's wonderful about these laws is that together they help to create in New Jersey a norm of equal protection, a norm of equality that allows all of us as lawyers, and if there are any students here, lawyers to continue to advocate for equality, right, for all people, and those who are particularly focused on AAPI communities. We can rely on these laws to highlight any ongoing discrimination that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are experiencing.
And Dean Cuison-Villazor, can you talk to us about some of the recent scholarships around the issue of anti-discrimination? Offer your perspectives on what's really important. What should we know? What should we be thinking about?
So in general, the way I think about some of the rise that you mentioned, the awful, the tragedies that we've experienced through in Atlanta, in California, New Jersey, and many other places, these tragic events are not new. We can go back historically and see multiple examples of violence perpetrated against Asian Americans because they were deemed to be others, right? They're deemed to be foreigners, that they don't belong here, we don't belong here. And so the rise of anti-Asian hate that some of us might have experienced on the streets or on the subways or in other places in the country, that's not new. And so recent scholarship have really pointed to the need to understand better, to be educated about AAPI history, to erase what seems to be historical amnesia and understand the connections between previous laws and what is happening today, and give us the ability, the tools to advocate for better treatment, for equality, for AAPI individuals. And so the fact that Asian Americans and communities are deemed to be others, are perpetual foreigners, they serve to remind us of the ongoing work that we need to do, because the rise, unfortunately, my sense is that anti-Asian hate will continue. Right. And it's important, therefore, to equip ourselves with the ability to support others who are experiencing those any kind of violence against them, and then also to ensure that we collaborate with other groups so that we have allies among us. And so recent scholarship have also called for greater alliances and greater collaboration with other affinity groups and other communities, because what happens to us also happens to others and vice versa, right? We're all in it together. The last other type of Asian American discrimination against Asian Americans seems to have also focused on the resurgence of alien land laws. Florida, for example, passed a law that now prohibits Chinese nationals from owning property and buying certain property in Florida. There are copycat bills in other states, Alabama, Texas, and so there is, for some reason, we've gone through this before. 1948, the Supreme Court said these laws are unconstitutional, and yet we have laws like the Florida State Alien Land Law that has come up again. That points to historical amnesia that I mentioned earlier. And so recent scholarship is drawing attention to the need to better understand, again, why these laws, alien land laws, were unconstitutional in the first place, and why state legislatures today should not be passing those laws again.
And one final question, Dean Cuison-Villazor, before I let you go. The model minority myth is a concept you have explored in your work. Can you explain that concept and what it means?
Yeah, so many of us have heard of the stereotype of or characterization of Asian Americans as model minorities. And that stereotype refers to how Asian Americans are hardworking, we're so smart, and we're successful. We are the model minority, so the characterization goes. There's danger in that. First off, it's a myth. Why do I say it's a myth? Well, think about law in particular, where the legal field, Asian Americans are still severely underrepresented in the legal field, in the judicial branch. We remain underrepresented in the political field. And so it's a myth in that we're not necessarily the story of the successful Asian American and Asian Pacific, successful Pacific Islander erases the fact that there are still ongoing barriers to many fields in the United States. It's also used as a driving to create a wedge between Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and other racialized, minoritized communities, right? Because then we are pitted, AAPIs are pitted against them, and then we are marked as the good people of color. And what that means is when there's someone that's good, then there's someone that's bad, right? And so the stereotype here is designed not necessarily to benefit Asian Americans, but it's used in a way to create division within the community. And the way I think about the model minority myth is that, Dr. Lu is here, and others who advocate for health outcomes. I think about mental health consequences when there's such a push for children to be the model minority, and ignores the ongoing anxiety and depression that Asian American children go through because of the pressure to live up to the so-called model minority stereotype. It's a myth. And all of us really need to fight back on and understand that it's not necessarily a stereotype that benefits the community. It creates far more harm than good.
Thank you, Dean Cuison-Villazor, for your insight and for all your good work in this arena. We are fortunate today to be joined by Fannie Chan Jarvis, the AAPI Liaison for the New Jersey Division of Civil Rights. Ms. Chan Jarvis, welcome and thank you for joining us today. I mentioned earlier the recent high-profile incidents of anti-Asian discrimination, but as we all know, these are just few that were actually reported and made the news. There are many other victims of anti-Asian hate crimes in our country. So with respect to anti-Asian discrimination in New Jersey, can you speak to our state agency reporting on anti-Asian discrimination, steps taken by the Division on Civil Rights, and what the AAPI community and our allies can do if they are a victim or know someone who is a victim of a bias incident?
Sure, I'll do my best. Hello, everyone. Thank you once again, Legal Services of New Jersey, for inviting me and the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights to join you on this webinar. Thank you, especially Janice and Akil. So as mentioned, I am with the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights. And what I'll share with you today, hopefully will resonate. The information that I will share with folks today will resonate with you and your loved ones in terms of the state protections that you have in New Jersey that protect all of us against discrimination bias, and harassment. And I'm going to piggyback off of the dean's comments as well in terms of, she mentioned the law against discrimination. She mentioned how model minority myth, the perpetual foreigner myth also feed into how bias, harassment, and discrimination impacts AAPI communities. But let me give you some background information first. Okay? So as some of you may know, the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights is the state agency responsible for preventing and eliminating discrimination and bias-based harassment in employment, housing, and places of public accommodation. So that, more simply put, are places that are open to the public, including schools, businesses, hospitals, and restaurants, right? The Division on Civil Rights enforces the three key state protections, including the law against discrimination, which the dean mentioned, which is the strongest and broadest anti-discrimination law in one of the strongest and broadest anti-discrimination laws in the country. The second key state protection that the Division of Civil Rights enforces is the New Jersey Family Leave Act. That is not the same as the federal Family Medical Leave Act. That is different, right? And I'll go into depth about that in a bit, right? The third key state protection that the New Jersey Division of Civil Rights enforces is the Fair Chance in Housing Act, which Governor Murphy signed into law last year to protect individuals with criminal records from being unfairly denied safe and affordable housing. On that particular note, some people might say, well, how does that particular act impact AAPIs? You know, AAPIs are model minorities, right? Wrong. You know, if we, ignore the fact that there is, a population of AAPIs who are imprisoned or who are former felons, we are erasing their lived realities. We are ignoring the fact that they have challenges, same with the general population in re-entering into society. And one of those challenges being finding safe and affordable housing. The three state laws that I mentioned, the law against discrimination, the Fair Chance in Housing Act, and the New Jersey Family Leave Act, all encompass all New Jerseyans, protect all New Jerseyans, including AAPIs. Right? My role as a community relations specialist, I am not a lawyer. Right? My role is not to offer legal counsel or legal advice, but my role is to inform the general public and especially the AAPI community about the rights that we have in New Jersey, which thankfully are many, right, is to raise awareness about the anti-discrimination laws that protect us all, and to raise awareness about how to file a complaint should we face bias, harassment, or discrimination. Right? The Community Relations Unit, which I'm a part of, I'm the newest member. We like to say we are a small but fierce and mighty team. We are one of several units in the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights, which is led by a New Jersey native, Sandeep Iyer. And as I mentioned, I am not a lawyer, but he is a lawyer. Okay, but we do not offer legal counsel or advice, but we do offer a wealth of information and materials and resources that are available on our website. And if I could just share that website, it is incredibly easy to remember. Is njcivilrights.gov. And we tell that website to students, to seniors, and it's very easy to remember. And we tell them, go on our website, 1, to file a complaint, 2, to download printable fact sheets about your rights under the law against discrimination and the 2 other state protections I mentioned. And these fact sheets are available in 14 languages, including Asian languages like Chinese, traditional, and simplified, in Korean, Punjabi, Gujarati, and I'm missing many other languages, but we have them in a total of 14 languages. So this website, please commit it to memory, njcivilrights.gov. let me talk a little bit more about discrimination. It's real, and it is still happening. We think the pandemic is over. Some people think discrimination against AAPIs is over. It's not, unfortunately. We know that as individuals, we know that as communities, we know that as a state agency. And that is why New Jersey's governor, New Jersey's attorney general, Matthew Platkin, are committed to fairness and equality, and why we are strengthening, our laws against discrimination. What I want to say to Asian Americans on this call, on this webinar, I know that some of us may think that something about us, or somebody might think, a non-Asian might think something about us inoculates us against discrimination. Maybe it's our skin color, maybe it's our last name, or our fluency in English, but we are not exempt from prejudice. We are not exempt from racism or harassment. We may think where we live or where we went to school or what jobs we have may shield us, right, from severe or pervasive acts of harassment. Unfortunately, that doesn't. We may earn enough money so that the balance in our savings accounts have 2 commas or maybe 1 comma, right? We may even vote in all elections and volunteer in local schools and organizations. We are still not exempt from bias, harassment, or discrimination. And like many families, we have internalized the model minority myth. We have been told, keep our heads down, don't cause trouble, don't report, don't engage with government agencies. I'm here to say, please engage, please report, please interact with your communities. Right? These ideas, these ideologies are not uncommon to different communities, but they are certainly common within the Asian American communities. Many of us are not so lucky to go a lifetime without facing one form of bias, harassment, or discrimination. If we are, we've been really blessed, right? Some of us have experienced this ugliness on a regular basis, right? Some of us may think that this happens to others, not us, not our loved ones, right? But here's real talk, as I have said to others. Every person in this webinar, every person in our state, regardless of the privileges or individual identities or intersecting identities that we hold, we may be vulnerable to bias, harassment, or discrimination. We can't wave a magic wand. We can't wish upon a star to make anti-Asian discrimination go away. We have to educate ourselves. We have to know about our civil rights. We have to talk to others about their civil rights. And we have to then appropriately work together to respond, to seek remedy, and to effect change. So to the folks on the webinar, if there's nothing else that you take away from what I say today, please know this: the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights is here for you. We are here if you wish to know more about your civil rights. We are here for you if you wish to file a personal complaint because your individual rights, perhaps you fall into one of the 20 different protected categories under the law against discrimination. As the dean said, it could be race, religion, sexual orientation, gender expression, gender identity, religion, right? Any of these intersecting identities that you may hold. If you fall into any one of these categories, and of course on our website, we list all 20. If you wish to file a complaint because you have faced such bias, harassment, and discrimination, and it's a violation of the law against discrimination, the New Jersey Division of Civil Rights is here for you. We are here for you if you wish to partner with us to bring Know Your Rights sessions into your community spaces. We are here for you if you wish to share your concerns about rising cases of bias, harassment, discrimination in your workplace, by your housing provider, or in places of public accommodation. The New Jersey Division of Civil Rights, we want all New Jerseyans to know that you can file a complaint or reach out to us, even if you're not a Democrat or a voter or a citizen. Your political affiliation or immigration status does not matter to us. We are here for you, and especially if you are nice, I like to say. So that is, in a nutshell, the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights and what we do with in the Community Relations Unit, but I will be happy to expand on the law against discrimination, the New Jersey Family Leave Act, and the Fair Chance in Housing Act, and how that protects all New Jerseyans, including AAPIs.
Thank you, Ms. Jarvis, Ms. Chan
Thank you.
Jarvis. That's really, a lot of very important and critical information. And thank you for sharing that website too. We did put it in the webinar chat, so hopefully folks will familiarize themselves with what is available there. But before I let you go, I just wanted to ask you one follow-up question. So how can we make connections with the community to help advance AAPI rights? I mean, are there ongoing projects? Are there things that the division are doing that would require volunteers? I mean, if somebody wanted to get involved, what can they do?
They can reach out, okay, through our website, to me, to my fearless director, Tisha Leonardo Santiago, to Sandeep Iyer, to our Attorney General. So, if I didn't mention earlier, so the Community Relations Unit is one of several units within the New Jersey Division of Civil Rights. The New Jersey Division of Civil Rights falls under the Department of Law and Public Safety, which is housed under the Attorney General's office, and of course, which falls under the governor's office. So there's the hierarchy, okay? But we are the Community Relations Unit. We are very accessible, approachable. We want to partner with community organizations. And we have our community stakeholders database. If you wish to be added to that, certainly we can do so, but we are also actively seeking partners, more partnerships. So we have gone into houses of worship, schools, community organizations, allied groups, okay? And we have brought Know Your Rights information sessions. We've also responded to crises. We will go into a space where someone has invited us or because of a situation that has come to our attention. And we go into those spaces and we talk about how the law protects each and every single person in that room, how it protects all New Jerseyans, and what we can do together to respond to that particular moment or issue, okay? And how we can take further steps. What we like to say in the Community Relations Unit is we're not one and done, folks, okay? We are continually engaging with individual organizations. So if I am talking with the Fort Lee Chinese Community Association or the Asian American Alliance in South Jersey, right? It's not just about tabling at their one community festival and passing out one leaflet about Know Your Rights, right? It's about ongoing commitment to engaging with these communities, being in their spaces and talking to them about Know Your Rights, sharing information so they are seeing an uptick in bias, harassment, discrimination. They can bring it to our attention and we can work together to appropriately respond. But we are very approachable and very reachable. I'm happy to share my individual email address. It's a very easy formula. It's first name, which is Fannie, and then it's a dot, and then my last name, Fannie.Chan Jarvis at the same website, njcivilrights.gov. Very easy, Fannie.Chan Jarvis at njcivilrights.gov. And we are a committed group of people in our Community Relations Unit, but also in the entire division.
Thank you so much. We really are very fortunate to have a champion in you for this cause. And I love that. I love that saying, we are not one and done. I love that. I mean, I think that is really something that we all should remember as we continue to fight for this longstanding problem. So turning to Dr. Ying Lu, who has spent her career studying and shedding light on the history of Asian Americans. Dr. Lu, welcome and thank you for joining us. Your life's work is educating people about the history of Asian Americans, their contributions, oppression, and resistance. Why is it important and how can we address the issue of anti-Asian discrimination in our elementary, middle, and high schools?
Thank you, Janice. And also I want to thank Dean Cuison-Villazor and Fannie for your insightful discussions on the Asian American racism and Asian American discrimination experienced by Asian Americans. And thank you, Fannie, for your work in civil rights, protecting Asian American civil rights. I want to focus on some of the discussions in public schools. And first of all, I want to begin with some stories and quotes told by our students. Hannah, she's a high school student and an activist from Livingston AAPI Youth Alliance. And she said that she wanted to end her life in 6th grade after she was repeatedly told by her classmates, and they refused to acknowledge her as deserving of equal treatment. And she was taunted with racial slurs in school every day during 6th grade. And such incidents are very common, a common experience among many Asian American students in schools. And here's a poem titled, "What's Your Name?" written by high school student Ying Lu, where she expressed how she was repeatedly mocked and questioned about her Asian American identity because of her ethnic name. What maybe you don't know, right? So as a matter of fact, the Asian American students in K-12 schools are often subject to racially motivated bullying and microaggressions. And they're also often subject to stereotypes such as Asian American students are good at math and lack of leadership in schools. In overall, the students feel that bias against them can easily be provoked due to lack of knowledge, which lead their peers to believe in lies and stereotypes in social media. And they don't feel like they're being accepted and included due to lack of representations in school. Despite that, nowadays, the Asian American students account for close to 15% of student body in New Jersey. And this lack of representation and lack of feeling to be included has profound impact on our students. Like Dean Cuison-Villazor mentioned. And here I want to also quote in the 2023 report, based on results from a national survey, the social tracking of Asian Americans. They found that among all ethnic groups, the Asian American, especially young Asian American women, are the least likely to feel they belong and accepted in the US due to racial discrimination and lack of representation of Asian American leaders. And also a suicide rate is the leading cause of death among for Asian American youth, among many causes of death. And so I want to also talk about, right, how can we make a change in the public school? For given that all this experience our Asian American students have, to address these issues in public school, just like many racism in the US, right, there's always structural reasons. And in the public school, for one of the issue is there's a lack of Asian American teachers and administrator and counselor representation. For example, in New Jersey, we have 15% of Asian American students, and in many school districts, we have more than 50% of students are Asian Americans. However, the teachers and administrators, only under 2% are Asian Americans in New Jersey public schools. And another issue with lack of representation lays in school curriculum. Well, until 2022, the New Jersey Social Studies guideline, the guidelines specify contents to be taught in history and social study classes in K-12 schools. I read that over 90-page document. The term Asian American was only mentioned a couple of times. So altogether, this highlights the importance of we need change in teacher diversity and the curriculum inclusion. And while it may take longer to build a pipeline of diverse teacher and administrative teams, and we think it's time for us to ask for change in the curriculum content.
So Dr. Lu, can you discuss some efforts that have been taken to advance and combat discrimination through your advocacy to promote AAPI education in school curriculums?
Yeah, sure. So we are since spring 2021, I've been working with an advocacy group called Make Us Visible New Jersey. And we started as a grassroots group of professionals, parents, students, and educators. We wanted to advocate for thoughtful and comprehensive inclusion of Asian American and Pacific Islander studies in K-12 schools in New Jersey. In 2021, during the year of 2021, we have devoted most of our efforts on legislative advocacy. So we supported Senate Bill S-4021 and Assembly Bill A-6100, sponsored by Senator Gopal and Assemblyman Mukherjee and Assemblyman, now Senator Gordon Johnson, that mandates the inclusion of Asian American Pacific Islanders contribution history into K-12, into the curriculum of K-12 schools. And in this legislative advocacy journey, thanks to the broad support of our communities, and also we felt very honored and grateful for the overwhelming support we received from New Jersey, the community. We were able to build a broad coalition that made of Asian American groups and individuals, civil rights and social justice groups, and educator and education policymakers, and the professional organizations and the broad legislature support. So as a result, the AAPI curriculum bill was passed with almost unanimous support, and we have 44 co-sponsors for the bill, for the AAPI curriculum bill in the Senate and Assembly. Another thing I want to also mention in our legislative advocacy, a very important aspect of this is we're thankful and we relied on the interracial and intergroup solidarity. The bill that we advocate for was inspired by the Armistead Commission for Teaching Black History Bill and the LGBTQ and the Disability Bill. And also the New Jersey Legislative Black Caucus had really supported for our bill. And so we're very grateful and for all the support we received in our legislative advocacy. However, so the law was passed signed into a law in January 2022 by Governor Murphy. With the law in place, this is not the end of the story. Because in New Jersey, the education system is very, very decentralized. The state law and mandate just only have very limited power to ensure that AAPI curriculum content is taught in classroom. But there's no way they can monitor how the curriculum is taught, whether it's taught in a meaningful way. The social studies guideline I just mentioned are very, very general, just list of bullet points. And there's no specific measures and quantifiable outcomes. The school districts, on the other hand, and the Board of Education, they have a lot of power to decide specific contents of curriculum and how this content is being taught in classrooms. So after the curriculum law, and we have very much focused on the implementation of the AAPI curriculum law. And it's a long haul to ensure curriculum contents to be taught in a meaningful way in the classroom. There are a lot of challenges. One of the issues is the teachers they need support because they were trained without the proper knowledge. They don't have the content area knowledge about Asian American Pacific Islanders history and studies. And to incorporate new contents, it can be time costly and burdensome. And so one of our efforts, so we focus on the effort after law is on supporting teachers through professional development so that they're adequately equipped with knowledge and to incorporate the AAPI content. And we have been partnering with many professional development providers such as New Jersey Historical Society, Immigrant History Initiative, SADA, which is South Asian American Digital Archive, and the Asian American Education Project, as well as important stakeholders in education, such as the New Jersey Education Association, and we partner with the Professional Development Department and New Jersey Social Studies Supervisor Association. And also in 2022, so far, we've reached out to 32 school districts and coordinate many professional development workshops on teaching AAPI history in partnership with many of our PD providers. And yeah, in a nutshell, right, to the implementation of AAPI and how we ensure the curriculum contents to be incorporated, it's a long haul.
And thank you. And one final question, Dr. Lu, can you talk a little bit about the E Pluribus Unum Project, what its mission and its vision, and what your role is in that project?
Sure. So we started as a group advocating for Asian American Pacific Islanders curriculum inclusion. But now we realize that just advocating for AAPI curriculum is not enough, because the real challenge in the school, in the education is how can we create a broader space for the educators to learn and share social studies and literature materials that reflect a pluralistic vision of the knowledge. We don't want to view curriculum diversification as a silo. Here's a unit of Asian American history, and here's a unit on Black history. And rather, we want to see that this is a transformative change in education that reflect the nature of our pluralistic society, where all groups and all knowledge and culture is viewed on the equal ground instead of a Eurocentered diversity model. So the E Pluribus Unum means out of many, one. And so this really reflects our vision that we want to expand and help all groups, elevate all groups to achieve, to get representation in curriculum and in classroom.
Thank you again so much, Dr. Lu. We really do appreciate all the good work that you have been doing in raising awareness about Asian American history and education. And I think that those are two really very important causes. And, we're so glad that you are taking that on and really doing all that good work on that. So our final panelist is Maria Vallejo, who is my dear friend and the first Filipino American president of the Hudson County Bar Association. Ms. Vallejo, you have served as the chair of the New Jersey State Bar Association Diversity Committee for 3 years. You're now the first Filipino American president of the Hudson County Bar Association, one of the most diverse county bars in the state of New Jersey. Can you talk about what the legal community has done over the years in response to AAPI discrimination?
Thank you so much, Janice. And thank you again to Janice. Thank you to Akil. Thank you to all the panelists, because it's been really interesting to sit back and listen to all the information and how important AAPI issues are and all breadths of life, right? And I think before I delve into that, why do we care what lawyers have been doing related to AAPI? I think it comes full circle. The first conversation was Ying Cuison-Villazor was talking about various laws that impacted Asian Americans, immigration, citizenship, and land use laws, right? They can be used as a shield as well as a sword. And when you sit in our space as lawyers, some people potentially judges, those who morph into the political field, it becomes critical. And so as Janice had mentioned, I'm president of the Hudson County Bar Association. Hudson County has one of the largest communities of Filipino Americans that we have in the state. And I was also the co-chair of the diversity committee for the state bar, so it's the entire state. I was also a director of AAPI, the Asian Pacific American Lawyers Association of New Jersey. The reason why I mention all of those is because they're all bar associations. And for the lawyers who are online, everybody knows what a bar association is. For those who are not, So I'm going to explain a little bit. So essentially, these are organizations, usually nonprofit organizations that are dedicated to the profession, elevating the profession, educating people, educating attorneys and judges, as well as the community, right? It's the intent to build a better bar, bench and bar, because they're usually a community together and they work together. So a lot of the work over the last few years really stemmed from the pandemic. As a lot of the conversation, as Janice had mentioned, there was a lot of discrimination, violence against Asian American Pacific Islanders, as well as all minority groups. We all may remember the murder of George Floyd. And as a result of that, as a result of the country being in this state of unrest, the bar associations recently really galvanized the conversation. And part of this was that everybody was in lockdown, you may remember. So what did we have? We had Zoom meetings like we're having right now. We had the ability to touch more people. You know, we have close to 900 people on this call, right? We had the ability to touch more people through Zoom programming and through organizations that way. So through the state bar, for instance, we created CORRAL, right, which is the Commission on Racial Equity in the Law. It was an organization that was supposed to be not necessarily one-off, but it was intended for that 1 year and has continued on today, where it focuses on issues that identify and recognize the root cause of inequity, and to figure out how we can prevent that in the future. Right. So CORRAL, for instance, at the end of its tenure, its second year, it's continuing forward, it's now in third and fourth year, we produced a 95-page comprehensive report that offered recommendations on how to address these inequities. Right. Very specifically, for example, it looked at what are some of the barriers for attorneys of color. Right. It took a look at the fact that there are exclusionary networking events, often golf outings or country clubs. And if you are an Asian American immigrant, you don't necessarily you've not necessarily been exposed to that. And I think a lot of times we look at Asian Americans in this sort of hierarchy, and this was touched upon by the other panelists. People were very well educated. What they forget is that there's a large swath that also did not have a strong education, that are blue collar, that are living day by day, paycheck by paycheck. Right? We are not all of those one extreme, right? So what do you have? You have just sort of this disparate group of individuals who, some of whom may have climbed and clawed their way up to get a law degree, but were not exposed to country clubs, don't know how to swing a golf club. This is often found for also female attorneys, not just Asian Americans, right? Most of us, unfortunately, don't know how to play golf. And what I realized myself was that when you're sitting on a golf cart for 4 hours, that's where you're making business, right? And that creates a disparity in how individuals move up, particularly AAPIs move up in the legal community. We also talked about law firm resistance to change, right? The good old boy network and how that's comfortable, right? And how we need to break through that. A real lack of mentorship, because if there's nobody in the position of power that looks like you, if we're not seated at the table, who mentors us, right? And just generally the marginalization of people of color, that they don't necessarily get the same assignments, right? Or you get the assignment, if you're an Asian American, I get the Asian American assignment. There's a woman who's been discriminated against, and she's Korean. By the way, I'm Filipino. You're Asian, you take that, so that way people think that it's an even playing field. Or that, of course not, you can't be discriminating against this individual because the entity is represented by another Asian, right? So the report looked at a lot of those issues and then offered some guidelines and recommendations on how to handle it, bringing cultural competency to law firms, hosting meetings with managing partners, with the affinity bars. And by the way, affinity bars are the bar associations where traditionally, historically underrepresented individuals belong to. So you have the Asian American group, the LSNJ. You have the GSBA, Garden State Bar Association, for Black and African American individuals, the Hispanic Bar Association, the Muslim Association, goes on and on and on. There's multiple affinity groups out there that specialize and focus on raising attorneys and judges from those particular backgrounds up, right? So creating networking events where everybody that is completely inclusive. The report also went on to look at pipeline for leadership. And this is something that Akil mentioned about Jhanice, that she is the chair of the Judicial and Prosecutorial Appointments Committee, which is key, right? So these are the folks who help put people into robes or to become prosecutors, essentially helps them become judges. And the value and affinity bar JPAC versus some of the county JPACs is that they promote individuals. They will actually have conversations with senators, introduce Asian Americans who are not, as Dr. Lu had mentioned, or not, and Fannie mentioned, we're not necessarily politically inclined. We tend to sit back a little bit, right? JPAC helps create that nexus to get people on the bench, to make them prosecutors, right? So aside from Corral, one of the things I'm really proud of as the former co-chair of the diversity committee was all you folks here right now who are attorneys and trying to get your diversity CLEs, it's in significant part to the New Jersey State Bar Association and a diversity committee. We fought for that. This was not an issue that was not raised. This was raised many years ago, but the timing wasn't right. It was the perfect storm, unfortunately, a perfect sad storm, really, right? Where you had a situation where, as I said, the nation was in turmoil and unrest, and people realized there was a necessity for education on diversity. And so now lawyers are required to take diversity CLE, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and bias removal training. It's part of the continuing legal education requirements that we have. And it's one of the things I'm absolutely proud of. I take flack for it sometimes because people don't love it. It's just another thing to add to the many things that attorneys and judges have to do, but I appreciate that. There's also the biggest part, probably the continuing legal education, right? So there's a lot of programming that was done, including all-day symposiums on race and equity. There was discussions on privilege and intersectionality. There's programs that continue till today, how to get historically underrepresented individuals onto the bench and become prosecutors, and the pathways to the bench and things like that. So I think that's what you're starting to see, and that's been coming out of the legal community.
So those are all really great strides, I think, in the right direction, and a lot of good work in progress. Have law firms and businesses responded? And if so, like, how have they responded to a lot of these initiatives?
So there's been some response, right? There's been an effort. And I think we have to appreciate the strides that we've made, as small as they may be, right? So some sobering statistics. First off, the percentage of female women of color who are sitting in equity positions is less than 4% nationwide, right? And this is for law firms. According to the National Association for Law Placement, in their January 2023 report, they said Asian Americans comprise approximately 12.12% of all associates in law firms. That significantly declined to 4.57% when you look at partners, right? Now, looking at Asian American women, we are 7.3% of all associated law firms, but yet 1.85% of partners in law firms, right? Not equity partners, just partners. That's very similar to the disparity that Dr. Lu was talking about. When you see you have students, a larger percentage of students in a classroom versus educators and people of leadership positions, right? Why does that matter? Because if I see someone who looks like me in a position of power, it gives me hope, right? It gives me the ability to think I can achieve that. Otherwise, those positions of power are only resigned to people who look a certain way. So law firms, law firms as well as other companies have been starting to hire DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion officers, right? This is somebody who's usually dedicated to that job. In law firms, It's usually a lawyer, but they're not practicing anymore. They're dedicated to recruitment, offering programming to understand what cultural competencies are. There's also mentoring and sponsorship programs that are starting to come about, right? And you're seeing slightly more promotion, right, into those equity positions, into those positions where you have a seat at the table. But that's on the larger scale. These are larger firms, larger law firms, larger corporations. When you're talking on the smaller scale, it's really got to be a grassroots work, right? It's something that I do in my firm where I sit there and consciously recognize, okay, let's look at the individuals we're bringing through the door for interviews. Are they diverse candidates? If not, why? Is it for the lack of trying? Is it for lack of advertising? Or are we advertising? Are we seeking out areas that historically do not have diverse individuals, right? It causes a lot of introspective work and sit there, and it's uncomfortable sometimes because if you're doing well, as some firms are doing, some corporations are doing, to sit back and say there's a problem in how we've been handling this all these years, despite the fact that we've been profitable. That's a hard sell to those who are in that room. We also talk about, I know that Dean Cuison-Villazor talked about the model minority. So if I could just touch briefly what some law firms are looking at, that they're looking at ways to close that promotion gap that I was talking about from associate to partner, one of which is the recognition of model minorities, right? As the dean noted, that this sounds like a great concept. We're smart, we're educated, we're respectful, but comes with that is all the dangerous notions that happen to be associated with that we are great workers, but not great leaders, right? Particularly with Asian American Pacific women, right? The concept is that we are soft-spoken. It's one of the things that I know I struggled with when I first entered the area of law. I was thought to be soft-spoken, and that I would not survive, in fact. Well, the difference is that I learned to be comfortable with myself, and they needed to learn to be comfortable with who I am because it's one of the skill sets that I have. I don't need to stab somebody or smack him around in order to achieve the same result, if not a better result, right? So it's something that we are starting to see law firms finally understanding because we're pushing it, right? There's also a recognition, this concept of recognizing the leadership framework, right? That is often based on male Western values, right? And this goes again to the concept of the soft-spokenness, whether, the concept of somebody in positions of power are those who are louder, more brash, in your face, fit a certain description that we think of. And that law firms are taking a really good understanding of what cultural competency is, and by educating their own members, not just the leadership, and recognizing that there's certain biases that happen.
So we've talked a lot about the what, and I'm going to ask you my one final question for you, Ms. Vallejo, and that is the why. Why are diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives? Why is that important?
So two main reasons, right? First one is, do you want to build a good firm or corporation or company that will thrive? And when you do that, your people need to be happy. They need to feel safe. They need to feel as if they're part of a quote unquote family or organization that cares about them, right? DEI gives that to you. It lets everybody from whatever position they're in recognize that that company cares about them. And then the second is, I always say that homogenous thinking brings homogenous individuals bring homogenous thinking, right? The same thought over and over again, if everybody looks the same. Bringing diverse individuals into a room brings diverse thought. And then with that, there's been a corollary to increased financial gain. So finances, caring about your employees and those who are working with you, those are the two main reasons I think that DEI is critical.
Thank you so much for your input. Before we get into final takeaways and get to the Q&A, I see Rachel has popped in because I completely forgot to give everyone the code, so I'm in trouble. But here she is now.
That's okay. I am here to give the second and final CLE code. The word is sky, S-K-Y. The sky is very blue today, sky. You do not need to put the whole sentence in, just the code word. I did have a few questions come up. And for anybody who thinks they may have missed the first code word, please email training@lsnj.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. So I wanted to just pose a question for everyone, and we can sort of like take turns answering it. And you can answer one or the other. The first is really, what can we do to help as a legal community, as community members and citizens? If you can provide one or two examples for the group today. And the other is, if you'd prefer, what are your final thoughts or message you would like to share with the group before we close out? So I will start with Dean Cuison-Villazor first.
Thank you. So in terms of takeaways, the main takeaway I would like for everyone to remember here is that looking through history, if we take a step back and we examine U.S. history, there are many points there that show the ways in which laws subordinated against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, whether it's through immigration, through citizenship, through property ownership. And that history has implications for us today and connects directly with the rise of anti-Asian hate and discrimination that many people within our communities are still experiencing. So what can we do about that? I think I am deeply appreciative of Dr. Lu's work and the work of others who are changing the K-12 curriculum. At law schools across the country, including at Rutgers Law School, we've been offering Asian Americans and the Law, a course that I've taught before for many years. There are the Judge Chin and his Albany group have the reenactments to help us better understand Supreme Court cases, right? And then more discussions like this one. I think it's really helpful that this panel was organized in order to shed light on our history and how it connects with contemporary issues.
Thank you, Dean Cuison-Villazor. Ms. Chan Jarvis, final thoughts?
Sure, Fannie. Before I give final thoughts, I would actually like to expand on what I mentioned about the law against discrimination. So in addition to the protected categories I mentioned earlier, other ones include national origin, nationality, and ancestry. And the law against discrimination protects 20+ protected categories, actual and perceived. So there's a difference there. And as lawyers, I'm sure you understand. But let's take a case example. So a pregnant Asian American woman feels that her manager has been unfairly treating her because he has made anti-Muslim comments and anti-immigrant comments, right? She is in fact an American born, right? And she is not Muslim, she is Christian, right? She wishes to file a complaint with the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights because she feels that her rights have been violated. She feels that she is facing bias in the workplace. She feels that she is being harassed by her manager because of her, because of what he has said, because of how he treats her. These are all misperceptions by the manager. He perceives her one way. She's not actually Muslim. She's not actually an immigrant, but she can still file a complaint. What matters in this particular case example is the perception, right? So I just wanted to add to that. And then also, in terms of a takeaway, as I mentioned earlier, New Jersey Division on Civil Rights is here for every single New Jerseyan, including Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And I want to say to all of us on this call and beyond, we all have privileges, and in whatever space we are in, I encourage everyone to hold space and lift up others as an ally, whether you are an Asian American, in support of a fellow Asian American, or you're a non-Asian American, and you see that someone is facing bias, discrimination, or harassment, ask them how they would like to be supported. Ask them how you can help them speak up against this discriminatory behavior. And also turn to, again, the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights and know your rights. I know that not all lawyers understand these 3 key protections. We had lawyers who said before they joined the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights, they themselves did not know about the law against discrimination and the breadth of it. So I encourage everyone to read up on these 3 key state protections. Again, the law against discrimination, the New Jersey Family Leave Act, and the Fair Chance in Housing Act.
Thank you so much. Dr. Lu? Final thoughts?
Yeah, so my takeaway thought, because I also see there are comments and questions asking about teaching history of all groups that have been discriminated. I want to comment on our view of how we see American history and also the American experience. Because the current view about American history, right, even when we talk about, also as I mentioned earlier, it's the Eurocentric diversity view, because the current view, when we look at history of experience of different groups, oftentimes we see it as a separated experience, or like parallel history. There's a Black history that's parallel to the Asian American history. And the experiences, I also see some comments or questions said, oh, the Asian Americans are separated from other group. The truth is, the true history and the experiences, the American fabric is interweaved by the history and experiences of many individuals. There are linguistic differences, there are cultural differences, heritage differences, but it's interweaved by the experience of many individuals. And I think once you understand that, right, and also the backdrop of this is the Eurocentric view and the colonialism view and Orientalism. So once you understand that, then it's not that hard for it to talk about history, teaching history that reflect a pluralistic society. And I can also offer, just a couple of examples you may know or may not know, that surprising fact, right? So one example, so the Black and Asian Americans have quite a bit of a shared history. For example, after the emancipation, a lot of slaves were set free. So in the South, there is a lack of labor. That's where a lot of Chinese labor coolies were sent to the South. So there's a shared history in the Mississippi Deltas about the Blacks and the Chinese American that has been rarely mentioned, right? And another thing about the railroad, I see somebody mentioned about railroad as a, so for one thing, right, the railroad, it's not just Chinese labor built the railroad. As a matter of fact, over 90% of labor were Chinese, built the western section of the railroad hired by Central Pacific Company. And there were, at any given point, there were over 15,000 Chinese laborers worked on building the railroad. But this had been not recognized by the Department of Labor until 2016. But I want to also mention the backdrop. This story was also, while there are plenty of the Black laborers, but the owners of Central Pacific Company did not want to hire Black people. So they would rather went all the way to the other side of the Pacific Ocean. I just want to mention it, once you see history as take a view that step away from the preconceptions of how we see American society and the history, then you realize it's not all that hard to talk about our collective selves in an inclusive way. And this is also why we call our organization the E Pluribus Unum Project, because that, I think that's where everybody should see, right, what American is.
Thank you, Dr. Lu. I'm going to give Maria some time to give some final comments, and then I'm going to turn it over to Rachel because we do have some questions from the audience and I'd like to get to that. So Maria?
Sure, mine's really short final comments. So as the dean said, what you're doing today is the first step. You educate yourself, educate other people, right? And in doing that, you find allies and accomplices. For those who don't know the distinction, an ally, I'd like to say somebody who tells you, hey, there's a really great rally, you should go, right, on issues of underrepresented individuals. The accomplices is the person who actually went to that rally and stood between you and somebody who's an objector. Somebody puts themselves in harm's way. And your ally and your accomplice doesn't have to look like you or me, right? It can be anybody from every race, and that's sort of the plurality that Dr. Lu is talking about. So plurality, education, send the message out to everybody else and continue the conversation, because that's the only way we've been able to make these incremental steps and hopefully larger steps in the future.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel. We have about 3 minutes, I think, to answer some questions. We may not get through all of them. If we don't, we'll try to figure out a way to get you some answers, maybe in written form. So Rachel, take it away.
Thank you. Yes, I don't think we're going to get through all of them, but if we could ask the panelists if they would be able to maybe provide some written responses to the questions that are remaining, that would be great. I'm just going to go in order due to that. The first question, the API community is a fairly closed community. Do you think that impacts how they are consistently viewed as foreigners? And it also becomes easier for people not to embrace them because they do not have any familiarity with the communities? Does anyone want to take that?
Okay, just quickly to jump into it. As far as cultural competency, I think that's where that kicks in, right? Yes, there's a language barrier, but there's also language barriers with every other immigrant community out there, an exception to those who are English speaking, right? The distinction is sometimes that people don't take the time to understand or be culturally competent and who's sitting across from them, right? Some of that is as simple as, how do you pronounce your name? I know that sounds simple, but a name is critical, a name is important. And when you ask that question, you open up and you start engaging in the conversation. And people like myself, the people on this panel and everybody else, I think would be willing to have these conversations about the social distinctions that we may have as AAPIs and within our own community. We're all from different nations or heritages as well. While we fall under the ambit of AAPI, where I'm Filipina, it may be very different than having grown up in a Chinese household or a Korean household or Laos. Right? Like that's, I think those are things those are the conversations. If you engage in that, it will then allow you to better understand the culture and vice versa, rather than just viewing it as, here's a wall between us, right? Which is why I think in some respects that conversation the dean had about how people are considered outside of this realm occurs.
Yeah, can I just jump in also? I would also want to add, right, because Maria mentioned about outside. So the definition of inside and outside is a matter of, right, who claim to be the dominant group, right? What is American culture? What does it mean by inside, right? Or not you being. So I think it's a change of view. And also this is, it's not really true that the Asian American community is a closed community. It's a matter of, right, it's part of, our culture is part of the American culture, and other groups should learn about us rather than seeing as somebody as an outsider.
Oh, Rachel, you're muted.
Sorry, I was covering my mute button. Let me find another question that I think we can, I mean, they're all great questions. They all could definitely have lengthy. One attendee asked, are there differences between the challenges in the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities regarding the issues that we spoke about today?
I'm sorry, so you said within the Asian American, all of them?
Yeah, within the subgroups.
I'm sort of jumping back into the cultural competency concept, right? Each culture is different. And so if you lump everybody in the same way, you have the danger of mistreating them or not respecting the differences, right? There's a level of lack of understanding and appreciation for everybody's trauma in some respects, right? And what background they came with. And so you may have somebody who's coming from from Thailand, and they have a very different response system to social interaction than somebody from China, right? Like, so you will have different pockets of growth into whether it's corporate world or law firm world, right? And as I mentioned, that there is this disparity between educational backgrounds, and sometimes that lends itself through which country you came from or your ancestry came from. So I think people have to recognize that we're all not just one.
Thank you, Maria. I think we're just about out of time. I know that we didn't get through all of our questions, but I think we could try to respond to them in writing for those who did pose some questions. Really, addressing anti-Asian discrimination requires collective efforts, including raising awareness, challenging stereotypes, promoting inclusive policies, fostering cultural understanding, and advocating for justice and equity. I hope that we did a small part of that in the hour and a half that we had. I wanted to just thank everybody, all our panelists, our esteemed panel, Legal Services of New Jersey, Akil and Raj, and Rachel in particular. And we really hope that you enjoyed the panel. To the 1,000 plus of folks that registered today. And Akil, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Janice. I concur. It was a tremendous panel. Thank you for everybody. On behalf of LSNJ, our president, Dawn Miller, all of us here at the statewide system of legal services, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to all our panelists, our terrific moderator. Thank you all to the team here, Kelly, Rachel, Raj, and thank you all for coming.